Hey guys, thanks for coming back to the channel. I know it's been a while since I've done a proper long form video, so let's start one right now. Today, we're going to talk about common vehicle myths and what the truth around them is. Myth number one is one that's been discussed before, and the myth is that premium fuel is better for your vehicle or you can get more performance out of it. Now, there are a couple things that make premium fuel different. Number one is obviously the octane rating. What that actually means is that the fuel burns slower, not faster. In everyday commuter vehicles like a Civic, Accord, things like that, especially vehicles that are not turboed or supercharged, they're designed for an 87 octane fuel, which means you're unlikely to get any benefit from going to an 89 or a 91 or a 94 or whatever else you find around you. You are doing absolutely no favors to yourself by putting in 91 octane fuel into your Toyota Celica or your Corolla or your Ford Focus. These are designed for 87 fuel, and you'll get just as much power and just as much efficiency for the most part out of 87 fuel for any typical commuter or normal vehicle. This includes normal trucks. Now I know the modern Dodge Hemis recommend 89 or mid-grade. I've always run 87 in the couple that I've owned, and there's never been any issues. And most of the manuals say run 87 unless it knocks, and if it does, then move to 89. If your car is very modern and comes recommended with premium fuel, I'm thinking like a modern Mustang, they'll actually usually be able to accept mid-grade and low-grade fuel. Anyways, there's just a power decrease because there's actual like fuel management systems that can tell what octane of fuel you have in the vehicle. My Nissan Titan takes regular fuel, my Kia takes regular fuel, all of that stuff. 4Runner takes regular fuel. Now where it gets really complicated, or a little bit more complicated, is where you get older vehicles. And I'm kind of talking about things from the 80s and earlier, specifically cars that were designed before we put ethanol in our fuel. I'm lucky enough to live in an area where it's relatively easy to source premium fuel, like 91 octane, that is ethanol free or E0 fuel. Now I know a lot of you might not be near stations that sell E0, but thankfully I am. So for example, in my 82 Cutlass, I try to put in E0 fuel. If I could put in 87 octane E0 fuel, I would do that, but I don't have that option because there is no 87 E0 fuel near me. It's all 91. So that is myth number one. Do not over octane your commuter car or your crossover or something like that. Okay, moving on to our next myth. This one is likely to ruffle some feathers. To be honest, quite a few of these are going to ruffle some feathers. Okay, the next myth is that you should follow your manufacturer's recommended oil change interval. Now I know what you're thinking. Isn't that what you're supposed to do? Yes and no. A couple things you got to realize. Number one is if a manufacturer can recommend a longer oil change interval, that's a sale point. That's an extra thing that they can sell to you to convince you to buy from them. So if you're buying a new vehicle and one manufacturer said you only have to change the oil every 15,000 kilometers, but the other manufacturer said you got to change it every 5,000 kilometers, the extended oil change interval of 15,000 kilometers is going to be a selling feature for you. Number two, the manufacturer does not care about a vehicle's reliability outside of the warranty. There's really no incentive for a manufacturer to make a vehicle that lasts forever. In an ideal world for the manufacturer, you buy a new vehicle, you pay all the interest, you pay the depreciation, and the next day after the warranty runs out, the whole thing explodes. Not in a way that makes you not trust the brand, but something goes catastrophically wrong on the vehicle, and then you come back and buy a new one. There are vehicles out there that have a recommended oil change interval of 24,000 kilometers. Do you have any idea how long that is? Now, I understand you're going to say, oh, synthetic oils, they're much better than dyno oils. I get it, and they are. But that doesn't mean I'm going to go 24,000 kilometers for an oil change interval. On my older vehicles, say more than 10 years old, I do 5,000 kilometers. On newer vehicles, I do 6,000 kilometers. You know why? Because oil changes are cheap, really cheap, especially if you do them yourself. I'm in Canada, okay? We do not get the best prices on consumer goods. But if I buy it when it's on sale, I go to Costco, I get what, 10 quarts of synthetic oil for $40 Canadian. That's 2 oil changes on a regular gas vehicle. I have all the tools to do an oil change myself, and I get all of my oil filters from Rock Auto, so they're like $5 a piece. So on a vehicle like my little Kia, an oil change costs me somewhere around $25. And on a vehicle like my Titan that takes over 7 liters of oil, the oil change costs me, let's say, under $40. That's a full synthetic oil change. Changing your oil more often is far more important than the countless threads online talking about which brand of oil is better. Get the right viscosity, get a synthetic, put it in, and change it frequently. That's all there is to it. Most oil changes only take maybe 20 minutes. The modern 4Runners are actually a really annoying oil change because you have to remove basically 2 skid plates each time. Even that's a 35-minute oil change. Something like the Kia is basically like 15-20 minutes. This is the cheapest insurance you can have for your vehicle. Change your oil more often. Moving on to the next one, I just realized here looking at my script how much all of these are actually going to ruffle people's feathers, so I apologize in advance. I'm not trying to piss you off. Next one isn't too bad. It's relatively common knowledge, but I wanted to cover it anyways. The myth is that it's better to let your vehicle idle instead of turning it off and then back on again. Now, there's a lot of different opinions on this, and if we're talking simply about fuel consumption, then the argument stands. Idling your vehicle for a whole minute will definitely use much more fuel than turning it off, letting it sit for 57 seconds, and then turning it back on again. A couple things where this may not be the case. If you drive a shit box, like I do sometimes, and either of your battery or your starter are weak, then you probably want to leave that vehicle running. The reason is just because it might not start again. It's not to do with fuel efficiency. So those of you who drive shit boxes like me sometimes, you understand what I mean. Second one is your diesel engines, and I'm kind of talking about your American diesel truck engines of the last few decades. Those surprisingly use very little fuel when they're idling. A gas engine also uses less fuel idling than when it's driving at speed, but diesels use way less when they're idling. So I'm not exactly sure on the fuel efficiency trade-off there, but just understand that a diesel engine idling uses way less fuel. For example, up in the oil sands Fort McMurray area, if it's minus 40 overnight, workers will often just leave their diesel truck running overnight. And it's not like they wake up to an empty tank of gas. It's also so the vehicle doesn't have trouble starting in the morning, because big diesel engines, especially ones that are more than 4 or 5 years old, have a lot of trouble starting when it's extremely cold. But yes, for a modern vehicle, most vehicles on the road, turning it off, turning it back on again is not going to have tons of increased wear. It's not like starters wear out all the time. Like, they last for quite a while. Okay, moving on to the next one. I know this is gonna piss a lot of people off, so hold on to your teeth. People say you don't have to let your car warm up before driving it. That's false. Now, don't get me wrong, you can do whatever you want. You're just causing extra damage to your engine. Two things to keep in mind. Number one, oil doesn't stay everywhere in your engine when your vehicle is off. It all drains down, and almost all of it is sitting under your engine in the oil pan. The rotating assembly of your engine that needs lubrication is not inside the oil pan, it's above the oil pan. It's your oil pump and things like that that build oil pressure that spread the oil around to the rest of the engine. The older the vehicle is, the longer this takes. So yes, modern vehicles are better at lubing the valve train and the top half of the engine quicker than older vehicles, but it's not instantaneous. Even letting your vehicle warm up for 30 seconds for most places in the world is far better than just cranking it and letting it go. Hard on an engine to do that. The second thing is related to your pistons and your cylinder walls. There's something called piston to wall gap, and that has to do with the amount of air gap between your pistons and the cylinder walls. You have piston rings in there that help bridge that gap, but the piston rings are designed for the temperatures the engine will operate at when it's at normal operating temperature, not when it's really cold out. So the colder it is outside, like it is here, it's minus 20 right now, we definitely let our vehicles warm up. I understand the rotating assembly is still moving when it's idling, but anything past idle just means more wear on the engine. So you might as well let it warm up for a while, let your temperature gauge at least move a bit, and then take your car out. You don't have to let it idle for 30 minutes, but when it's, minus 20, letting it idle for 5 minutes before you drive it is definitely going to extend the longevity of your engine. Okay, so the last three myths that we're going to cover are kind of personal pet peeves of mine, so I apologize in advance if I get a little emotional here. The next one is people saying that 4x4 or full-time all-wheel drive doesn't make a difference in winter driving. This is spoken by either people who do not understand driving, or are idiots, or have never driven in real winter conditions. I understand where they're coming from. What they're trying to say is that 4x4 helps you accelerate, but it doesn't help you brake. And they are assuming that the only problem you have on icy conditions is accelerating and braking. And that's just not true. Yes, having 4x4 helps for acceleration. This is true. And sometimes you're at an intersection where it's sheer ice, and without 4x4, you will be spinning your tires for an extended amount of time. 4x4 lets you get going a lot quicker in those kind of conditions. It also helps in other things. If you lose control of the vehicle slightly and you start to track weird, 4x4 will absolutely help you track straight quicker than not having 4x4. If you're recovering from a slide, you're in a slow speed condition and your vehicle is sliding slightly sideways because it's sheer ice, four-wheel drive is absolutely going to help. The other thing they try to say is that, front-wheel drive or rear-wheel drive with proper snow tires is better than 4x4 with summer tires. Well, yeah. Summer tires are absolutely trash on ice and snow and anything like that. So of course, proper tires is incredibly important. I have a video on that. But this idea that 4x4 is only good in the winter for accelerating and It doesn't help you to track straight, to recover from a slide. All of this stuff is absolute nonsense. 4x4 or full-time all-wheel drive is the absolute best thing you can have in severely adverse weather conditions. Something like a manual Subaru Forester with studded Nokian Hakka tires is probably the absolute best winter vehicle you can get. And if you need a truck, get studded winters on your 4x4 truck. It's amazing. You basically ignore most snow and ice conditions. And for those of you who think that driving your truck in two-wheel drive mode when the road conditions are so bad that everyone's going 65 on the highway or 70 on the highway, I mean kilometers an hour, if you think that's really bad for your vehicle and you shouldn't have to do that, drive on sheer ice in a rear-wheel drive truck and see how that is. And then switch that truck to 4x4 and see how much more control you have. I'm not even talking about braking or accelerating. I'm just talking about maintaining a straight line on a completely iced over highway. Anyways, that one annoys me a lot, so let's get on to the next one. Okay, the next one's kind of funny because I remember hearing about this over 20 years ago before I even started driving. And this was people saying that a rear-wheel drive car is better in the snow than a front-wheel drive car because you can drift out of any sticky situations and straighten your vehicle more easily if you lose control a little bit on a road. I can't stand this line of thinking. Line of thinking is perpetuated by young, inexperienced drivers who have perpetuated the idea and the romanticization of drifting. Don't get me wrong, drifting is fun in the right time and place, but don't think that drifting is going to have you recover full control of your vehicle quicker than a front-wheel drive car. I'll even show you. Here's how I'll explain it. This is a Tupperware container with some water in it, and this is just a plastic case that floats on the water. Be anything that floats, it doesn't really matter. This is going to simulate our very slippery, icy conditions, and this is your vehicle on it, okay? Do you think it's going to be easier to keep this vehicle straight by pushing it across and correcting every time it wants to go somewhere? Or do you think it's going to be easier to grab it by the front and move it straight? Does that make sense? This takes a lot more effort to control the vehicle and keep it moving straight than grabbing it like a front-wheel drive car and dragging it across. Obviously, it doesn't matter which way you do it. I'll do it both ways for effect. That is much easier. Sorry, some static electricity buildup. Than doing this way and correcting as you go across. And that's a very basic example of why front-wheel drive, given the same tires on the vehicle, is much better for maintaining control than rear-wheel drive in icy and wintry conditions. I understand drifting's cool and all, but people underestimate how much skill drifting takes. If you're actually drifting in an emergency situation, you're likely just going to end up sideswiping a tree or a pole and ending up on YouTube or TikTok or something. To summarize, front-wheel drive is much better in adverse and winter icy weather conditions than rear-wheel drive. Okay, moving on to the next one. This one really grinds my gears. I'm seeing this happen a lot lately, especially online, and it gets incredibly annoying. And this is where people online tell you that you don't need whatever vehicle you have, and you can do what you want with whatever vehicle they think you should have. I don't think people realize how stupid and annoying that is. So like, the most obvious one is our liberal counterparts telling people you don't need that truck. You can do everything you want to do with a Volkswagen Golf, or insert other vehicle here. But it's a very common one to tell people that have trucks that they don't need trucks. So you're going to tell me what I need. You don't live my life. You don't do the same things I do, but you're definitely sure that what I need is what you think I need. So I'm going to use this as an example. So I don't need a truck. It's like, okay, well, I live in the middle of nowhere. I have a farm. I have a few animals. I have a trailer that I use to move things around, whether that be on the farm or on the road. I have to transport water. I have to transport garbage. I have to do all these kind of supply runs. I have to buy building supplies for any projects on the farm. I want to have 4x4 because I live down gravel and dirt roads that often don't get cleared. I also live in relatively northern Canada, so we get pretty intense winters most of the time. I also like to be able to carry emergency gear with me in case something happens. It's also nice to have gear on hand to tow a stranded motorist out of the ditch when it's the 36 straight hour of winter blizzard and the wait for a tow truck is 18 hours. So when your Prius gets pulled out of the ditch by a good Samaritan that stops in the middle of winter to help you out, that was probably someone where you told them they didn't need a truck. And it doesn't have to do with just living in the middle of nowhere. You could live in the city. Maybe you do renovations on your home. Maybe you have a holiday trailer. Maybe you have multiple different reasons why you might need a truck. And the common answer is, well, rent a truck when you need it. Yeah, it's really convenient to be reliant on other people for anything you want to do. That's a really nice luxury to have, but isn't it nice to have the stuff you need when you need it so you can do it yourself? One of the things a truck gives you is some independence and some self-reliance. You can do things now that you couldn't do with a Golf or a Taurus or a Fiesta or any number of small compact vehicles. Don't get me wrong, I drive a ton of kilometers and I love having a small commuter car for when I want to cover distance and not pay a ton in gas. But in the middle of winter, if I take out my commuter car, don't think that there aren't any trade-offs. I don't have as much emergency gear with me. I'm not able to pull someone out of a ditch. I don't have 4x4. All of these things. I can't haul as much. If I need to do anything, I am more limited. So don't think that it's your place to tell everyone else what vehicle they need. Anyways, that's it. That is 6 vehicle myths that I wanted to discuss and sort of debunk and talk about a bit. I know everyone might not agree with me and I probably pissed some people off and all of that stuff. But anyways, if you made it this far in the video, I appreciate it. Like if you enjoyed the video. Feel free to subscribe. If you do subscribe, do not hit the notification bell. You probably have 38 or more unread notifications on your phone. You don't need a 39th. You'll find my videos if you want to watch them. Take care. Have a good day.